lobbyist told the story of a phone call to publisher Steve Forbes asking him to back off the story. The caller was reportedly a former member of this commission. The media interference continued with an NBC Dateline story, Newswire services, and in personal telephone threats related to my appearance in that Dateline story. In August 2004, discussions commenced on congressional hearings scheduled to take place in February 2005. A participant working closely with Senate Banking Committee member Senator Robert Bennett has accused Committee Chairman Senator Richard Shelby of scuttling the hearings, stating, and I quote, "Senator Shelby tends to grab things like this for his own purposes, and his own purposes don't always mesh with what's best for the public." Is this yet another example of investors subsumed to the interest of securities industry lobbyists? The destruction for profit scheme manifested against Eagletech Communication was organized by 5 managing directors at Solomon Smith Barney. The scheme included broker-dealers, market makers, an offshore asset protection company, hedge funds, the convicted Anthony Elgindy, who was now facing a life sentence, his short-selling syndicate, and an SEC Enforcement Division investigation instigated by the Elgindy syndicate. In a media interview, former 15-year SEC attorney Brent Baker was quoted, "For years, the SEC was unable to control the infamous pump and dump schemes of stock market criminals. They actually developed a culture that believed that illegal naked short selling may be a counterbalancing force." The Commission's rules of procedure in this proceeding required the SEC to provide Eagletech with 49,000 pages of evidence and a 43,000 record electronic trade journal from a 2004 joint DOJ-SEC investigation. The SEC produced evidence that chronicled in great detail broker-dealers first selling Eagletech stock short, then personally investing in the Smith Barney organized pipe offering. Bank record evidence from the investigation exposed falsified closing documents intended to hide the relationship between Smith Barney and the broker-dealers who were trading on inside information. Goldman Sachs Execution and Clearing flipped those trades to an account entitled Flip Firm to cover the trail. Finally, the New York Supreme Court ordered the DTCC to produce Eagletech's trading records, and for the first time ever, denied the DTCC a protective order. NSCC continuous net settlement reports showed that Flip Firm's short sale positions were counterfeit electronic book entries, failing delivery using pseudo-borrows from the stock borrow program for 252 trading days, a full calendar year. During that year and extending into the next, 36 other DTC participant firms failed delivery for up to 212 days. The DTCC tells us that the stock borrow program only deals with 20% of failed deliveries. The other 80% are probably represented in the following example. The data comes from the clearing firm trade journal supplied by the SEC and parsed for the date May 12, 2000. On that day, 110 real people purchased Eagletech shares. 3 real people sold Eagletech shares. Totaling 82,000 shares. 18 DTC participant market makers traded 300,000 shares, not for consumers, but for their own accounts. However, the marketplace reported that only 176,300 shares traded that day. Where did the additional 206,000 shares come from? No issuer or auditor ever gets to see this data. This illustration of the chicanery going on behind the scenes in the clearing and settlement system makes a mockery of the concept of audited reporting. Why is this not an issue at the SEC? A plausible explanation is the culture described by former SEC attorney Brent Baker. How else do you explain a commissioner's now infamous New York Times quote, "Naked short selling amounts to nothing more than complaining shareholders who want their stock to go up." How about market regulation assistant James Bergagliano's explanation of grandfathering? "We were concerned about creating volatility where there were large pre-existing open positions and wanted to start afresh with a new regulation and not rewrite history." A week ago, an amicus brief filed by the SEC was made public. The brief supported the position of the DTCC in a Nevada lawsuit alleging improprieties in its stock borrow program. The Commission's brief cites the Uniform Commercial Code. A securities, and I quote, "A securities broker-dealer may credit a customer's account with a security even though that security has not yet been delivered. The customer receives a securities entitlement, which requires the broker-dealer to treat that person as entitled to exercise the rights that comprise the security." The brief ignores a more important UCC section, Section 8-504, and I quote, "A securities broker-dealer shall promptly obtain and thereafter maintain a financial asset in a quantity corresponding to the aggregate of all securities entitlements." The brief doesn't mention the word grandfather, for if everything stated in the brief were accurate, there would be no need for grandfathering. The SEC, in suspending the settlement process, also suspends the duty of the broker-dealer to obtain a financial asset, the delivery of the shares. Grandfathering has just effected a taking of shareholders' property and has given it to the naked short sellers who will never have to purchase shares to cover the sale. Most of the people in the auditorium today are investors whose property has been taken. They are here to protest their role as acceptable collateral damage in a securities market where non-enforcement is customary, investor confidence is wounded, and lack of integrity is the norm. Also compelled to be here today is a 13-state North American Securities Association task force, whose existence is only necessitated by years of non-enforcement. The state's issue is that they are the ones who bear the expense of the social consequences of the byproducts of unbridled securities fraud. To the media in attendance, there is an apocalyptic story to be told, if you have the conviction to write it and your editors have the backbone to defend it. The enemy of your story will be none other than your own board of directors, whose members are dominated by the securities firms responsible for the apocalypse. Chairman Cox, and I realize Chairman Cox isn't here today, I applaud the Commission in putting forth Regulation SHO. It's too little, it's too late, and it has left behind too many victims when you pardon the sins of the industry at the expense of investors. Your predecessor, Chairman Levitt, just came clean and pointed the finger of blame at members of Congress, yielding to lobbyists doing the bidding of Wall Street's miscreants. Will you do the same, or will you choose to do nothing? Your legacy, should you choose it, could be that of a master reformer. At long last, when will you stand up to the industry you regulate and fulfill your mandate to protect America's investors?
Could I ask a question before you leave? I was just wondering,